It was a typical Tuesday evening when everything changed. After a long day at the office, I decided to stop by the market. Ernest had mentioned wanting his favorite beef stew, and I thought it would be a nice surprise. Balancing bags of groceries. I made my way to our building, my thoughts filled with dinner plans and our two children, Alex and Mia, who were staying with their grandmother for the week. As I entered the building, I noticed a sign on the elevator, "Out of service." Groaning inwardly, I began the arduous climb to the 20th floor, each step growing heavier as I neared our apartment. By the time I reached our door, I was out of breath, and my muscles ached. I juggled the bags as I fished for my keys, noticing that the power seemed to be out. The hallway was dim, the usual hum of the elevator and distant TV sounds absent. I finally managed to unlock the door and stepped inside, greeted by an eerie silence. But then, faintly, I heard voices coming from the bedroom. I froze, straining to make out the words. "Ernest, you worry too much," a woman's voice said, followed by a tinkling laugh that made my stomach churn. "Helen's not going to be home for hours." My heart pounded in my chest. I recognized that voice. It was Sophia, Ernest's coworker. Anger and disbelief surged through me, but I forced myself to stay calm. Moving silently, I set the grocery bags down and crept closer to the bedroom door, pressing my ear against the wood. "You don't understand, Sophia," Ernest replied, his voice edged with panic. "Helen could come home any minute. We need to be careful." Sophia's laugh was sharp, almost mocking. "You're scared of her. What can she do? She's just a housewife." "She's more than that," Ernest snapped. "She could kick me out of the apartment, and with 2 kids, she won't want to be alone here." My hands clenched into fists as I listened. How dare they talk about me like this? Part of me wanted to burst in and confront them, but something held me back. I needed to hear more, to understand the full extent of their betrayal. "Ernest, calm down," Sophia said, her tone soothing now. "We'll figure this out. We always do. Maybe it's time we stop hiding. I want Helen to know about us." "No," Ernest insisted. "Not here, not now. It's too risky." "Why are you so afraid of her?" Sophia asked, her voice dripping with disdain. "What can she do to you?" Ernest sighed heavily. "You don't know her like I do. Helen is smart. She could make my life a living hell." I felt a bitter satisfaction at his words. At least he wasn't underestimating me. I continued to listen, piecing together their plans in Ernest's desperation. Sophia was pushing him to come clean, to leave me and start a new life with her. Ernest, ever the coward, was reluctant, knowing it wouldn't be as easy as she thought. "Look, Sophia," Ernest said finally, "we need to be smart about this. Helen will find out eventually, but it can't be like this. I can't lose everything." Sophia's voice turned cold. "Then you need to make a choice, Ernest, her or me." There was a long silence, and I held my breath, waiting for his answer. "I'll figure it out," Ernest said quietly. "Just give me some time." I had heard enough. Silently, I retreated to the hallway, my mind racing. Confronting them now would only lead to a messy emotional scene. I needed to be strategic, to outmaneuver them both. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed the grocery bags and slipped out of the apartment as quietly as I could. On the rooftop, the cool evening air helped clear my mind. I looked out over the city, feeling a strange mix of anger and clarity. I couldn't change what had happened, but I could control my response. I needed to think, to plan my next move carefully. As I stood there, the pieces of my plan began to fall into place. I wouldn't let them destroy my life. I would turn this betrayal into an opportunity, ensuring that my children and I came out on top. With a final deep breath, I headed back down to the apartment, ready to set my plan into motion. The morning after my rooftop revelation, I woke up feeling a sense of determination I hadn't felt in years. I had a plan, and now it was time to set it into motion. As I prepared breakfast, my mind raced with thoughts of how to maneuver through the web of deceit Ernest and Sophia had spun. Ernest shuffled into the kitchen, looking bleary-eyed and distracted. I greeted him with a bright smile, masking the turmoil churning inside me. "Good morning, darling," I said, placing a plate of scrambled eggs and toast in front of him. "I hope you slept well." He nodded absently, barely meeting my eyes. "Morning, Helen. Yeah, I did. Thanks." I sat down across from him, carefully broaching the subject that would set my plan in motion. "You know, I was thinking," we've been talking about needing more space for Alex and Mia. I heard about a wonderful apartment that's just come on the market. It's bigger and in a great neighborhood." Ernest looked up, interest flickering in his eyes. "Really? That sounds nice. But how would we afford it? We don't have the savings for a new place. I leaned in, lowering my voice as if sharing a secret. What if we could borrow the money? Do you think you could ask someone, maybe a friend or a family member? Ernest's brow furrowed in thought. I don't know, Helen. I mean, who would we even ask? I kept my tone casual, though my heart was pounding. What about Sophia? You've mentioned she's good with money. Maybe she could help us out just until we sell this place and get the new apartment. He stiffened slightly at the mention of her name, but I saw the wheels turning in his mind. Sophia, I suppose I could ask her. We're pretty close, after all. Exactly, I said, giving him a reassuring smile. It's worth a shot. This new place would be perfect for us. As he left for work, I felt a surge of satisfaction. I knew Ernest would approach Sophia, convinced it was for their future together. I had planted the seed, and now I just had to wait for it to grow. Days turned into weeks, and the plan unfolded just as I had hoped. Ernest managed to get the money from Sophia, and we began the process of selling our current apartment. I handled all the paperwork, making sure everything was in my name. When the sale was finalized, I bought a new apartment, registering it under my mother's name. One evening, Ernest came home looking triumphant. Helen, I did it. Sophia came through. We have the money for the new apartment. I feigned surprise and delight. Oh, Ernest, that's wonderful. I knew you could do it. He looked relieved, as if a great weight had been lifted off his shoulders. Yeah, it wasn't easy, but it's all sorted now. We can move forward. That's fantastic news, I said, hugging him. Let's celebrate tonight. How about your favorite beef stew? Ernest smiled, the tension easing from his face. That sounds perfect. Thanks, Helen. As I cooked dinner, I couldn't help but feel a sense of victory. Everything was falling into place. I was playing the long game, and soon Ernest and Sophia would realize just how thoroughly they had underestimated me. A few days later, the sale of our apartment was finalized. I made sure all the funds were transferred and used them to secure the new apartment, which I promptly registered under my mother's name. It was a strategic move, one that would ensure Ernest couldn't lay any claim to it during the divorce. One evening, as Ernest was busy in his study, I decided to confront him subtly, planting the final seeds of my plan. Ernest, I began, entering the study with a concerned look. I've been thinking a lot about our future and the kids. We need to make sure everything is in order, legally speaking. He looked up, a hint of suspicion in his eyes. What do you mean? I mean the new apartment, I said softly. We should make sure it's protected, in case anything happens. We wouldn't want any complications if something were to change. Ernest frowned but nodded. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. What do you suggest? I think we should register it under my mother's name, I suggested, watching his reaction carefully, just temporarily, until we figure things out. It's a safer option. He hesitated but eventually agreed. All right, if you think it's the best way. Thank you, Ernest, I said, leaning in to kiss his cheek. I just want what's best for us. As I left the study, I felt a wave of triumph. Everything was set, the apartment was secure, and soon I would reveal the truth to both Ernest and Sophia. They thought they were playing me, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. The day had finally arrived. With the apartment securely in my mother's name, and the money from the sale safely out of Ernest's reach, it was time to confront the deceit head-on. I knew I had to be strategic, to hit them where it would hurt the most their plans for the future. I dressed carefully that morning, choosing a crisp white blouse and a tailored skirt that exuded confidence. After dropping the kids off at school, I made my way to Sophia's apartment. It was a modest place, not far from where Ernest and I had lived, but it represented the life they thought they would build together. I rang the doorbell and waited, my heart pounding with anticipation. Sophia answered the door, her eyes widening in surprise. Helen, what are you doing here? I smiled politely, masking the anger simmering beneath the surface. Good morning, Sophia. I thought it was time we had a little chat. May I come in? She hesitated but eventually stepped aside. Sure, come in. I walked into her apartment, taking in the details. It was sparsely decorated, with a few personal touches that made it feel homey. I could see why Ernest was drawn to her. She exuded a sense of carefree independence that contrasted sharply with my meticulous nature. Please sit, Sophia said, gesturing to the small dining table. Can I get you something to drink? No, thank you, I replied, sitting down and placing my bag on the table. This won't take long. Sophia sat across from me, looking uneasy. So what's this about? I took a deep breath, meeting her gaze steadily. Sophia, I know about you and Ernest. Her face paled, but she tried to maintain her composure. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't insult my intelligence, I said sharply. I overheard your conversation with Ernest weeks ago. I know everything. Sophia's eyes darted to the door as if she were contemplating an escape. Helen, I raised a hand to silence her. Save it. I'm not here to argue, I'm here to inform you of the facts. You see, Ernest and I sold our apartment, and with that money I bought a new one. However, I didn't register it under our names. She frowned, confusion mingling with fear. What do you mean? The new apartment is registered under my mother's name, I said, leaning forward. Ernest has no claim to it, and when we divorce, he will get nothing. Sophia's mouth dropped open. You can't do that. I smiled coldly. I already have. Just then, the door opened and Ernest walked in, his face lighting up when he saw me. Helen, what are you doing here? I stood up, facing him with a calmness that belied my anger. I'm here to clear a few things up. Ernest looked from me to Sophia, his expression turning wary. What's going on? I've just explained to Sophia that the new apartment is in my mother's name, I said. You won't be getting your hands on it. His face flushed with anger. You can't do that. We agreed. We agreed to nothing, I interrupted, my voice icy. You betrayed me, Ernest. You and Sophia planned to steal my home, my security, but I was one step ahead. Sophia stood up, her face a mask of rage. You lied to me, Ernest. You said we'd have a new place, a fresh start. Ernest turned on her, desperation in his eyes. I thought we would. I didn't know Helen would. You didn't know because you underestimated me, I said. Both of you did. Ernest's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him. So what now? Now we proceed with the divorce, I replied. You'll pay alimony and you'll move in with Sophia. I don't care what you do after that, as long as you stay out of my life and my children's lives. Sophia glared at him. This is your fault, Ernest. You promised me everything. And I believed him, I said softly, looking at her, just like you did. But we both know now that his promises mean nothing. Ernest looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and regret. You really planned this all along? I nodded. From the moment I heard your conversation, you forced my hand, Ernest. I had to protect my children and myself. Sophia sank back into her chair, tears filling her eyes. What are we supposed to do now? I picked up my bag and walked to the door. That's for you to figure out. I have a new life to build, and I won't let either of you ruin it. With that, I left the apartment, the weight of months of deception finally lifting from my shoulders. I had faced them, revealed the truth, and come out stronger. Now it was time to focus on the future, my future, free from the shadows of betrayal. So if you love this story, be sure to subscribe, hit the bell, and comment below. Your interaction helps us grow.